Um, I don't know what to say about my career as a writer. I've always loved reading. I've always loved language. It wasn't until, in high school, all I was interested in was skateboarding. I wasn't a good high school student. I made enough grades to keep good enough grades to keep my parents off my back so that I could skateboard more. I did that, and then I took a few years off between high school and college, which is what your parents don't want you to hear right now. I took time off, and then I eventually went back to college, and I was in college when a wonderful world literature teacher in Corpus Christi, a man named Mike Ansaldua, came over to my desk. I think we were studying the Iliad, and he came over to my desk and he put a ticket on my, just in my hand, and he said, "Go to this." And it was for a reading by the novelist who turns out to be quite famous, a guy named Robert Stone. He wanted me to go to that reading that night. Until that time, I had never laid eyes on a living writer. I, in a weird way, sort of didn't know that writers existed anymore. I thought of all writers who had written the books that I love to read. I thought of them the way I thought of Shakespeare, the way I thought of Homer. I thought they were long gone. And so I went to this reading. It was the first reading I'd ever gone to. And I went in knowing that I loved to read. I went in knowing that I loved language. I went in knowing that I loved to write. And an hour later, I came out knowing that I wanted to be a writer. It seemed to me a dignified way to spend your life. And so that's what I've been trying to do ever since, is to envelop myself with language, to spend my time surrounded by books, to spend my time surrounded by people who really care about words. And that's pretty much it. That's what I still try to do when I'm not skateboarding. I'm trying to think of any interesting experiences that I had. I pretty much put myself through graduate school by writing stories for that series Chicken Soup for the Soul. They pay really well. The problem is that Chicken Soup for the Soul is not the highest literary brand in the world, and so I didn't want to associate myself with it, so I came up with all these kinds of pseudonyms. The best was Don Keys. Don Keys. Push those words together. So I was getting pretty significant checks made out to donkeys for most of my graduate school career. And I think that's all you need to know about me as a writer. So I'm going to read a couple of short things, and then we can talk about whatever y'all want to talk about, Ramses or decapitated crocodiles or the UHV baseball team, which I hear is very good. This is a very short story, and because I heard everything about the crocodile this morning, I thought I would read it. The story is called Caiman. Your mother wouldn't let me bring the ice chest into the house, so I left it in the garage. Earlier, I had cut 4 holes into the styrofoam lid. One of them looked like half a star, which I remember liking. This was years ago, a windswept Sunday. This was Texas. When I returned to the kitchen, your mother pointed at the sink. She said, "Wash your hands with soap." She was breading flounder. She had been listening to radio reports about that little girl who had been abducted. So had I. Probably I pulled over and gave that man $80 because I thought it would keep you safe. He was parked under the causeway, a hand-lettered sign propped against the tire of his van, as if he were just selling pecans. Your mother had flour dust on her neck. She had already fried okra, boiled potatoes. Soon, we'd call you to the table, and you, our little man, would bolt in like you had heard a starter pistol. You were 7. A boy who liked bedtime stories with fantastic monsters and twisty, unexpected endings. You liked sneaking up on us. You hid behind closed doors and in the laundry hamper, then jumped out screaming and laughing. You loved the word maybe. Maybe I'm a kid who's 1,000,000 years old. Maybe we should be a family with a pet. Maybe someday my eyes will turn blue. Your mother swiped her forehead with her wrist. The kitchen was gummy with the day's heat. The windows were open. Before leaving that morning, I had mowed the yard. You helped me rake. You wore your cowboy boots. And now, with dusk coming on, the cut grass smell was rising and trying to cool everything off. She's still missing, your mother said. Now they think the uncle did something. I nodded. I had heard that too, and if it was true, I thought he'd get killed in prison. But I didn't want to talk about such things. Instead, I asked, how's our little man doing today? Worn out, your mother said. He's napping in his room. I had been all day at the job site drawing overtime. On the drive home, I had seen the man under the causeway, and I pulled over just to have a look. Our ice chest was still in the bed of the truck from when we had gone floundering. I took that as a sign. And he only had one left, which also seemed lucky to me. I was excited to surprise you. I was excited to hear what you would name it. Now, I said, I wonder what he'll name it. He asked for a dog, your mother said. A pet, I said. He asked for a pet. Right, she said. A dog, a cat, a goldfish. Pets have fur and show affection. Pets aren't deadly. Goldfish don't have fur, I said. I didn't think she was angry, not really. I took 3 glasses from the cabinet. I said, and it's not deadly. She fixed me with her eyes. She said, it's an alligator. It's a Caiman, I said. There's a difference. It's the size of a shoe. Not for long, she said. She turned back to the stove. She laid one piece of fish in the skillet, then another. Grease started snapping. They're smart, I said, repeating what the man had told me. They won't mate until the river is high. They make sure there's enough water for their offspring. They build nests. They're cold-blooded, she said. They have scales. Danny can take it for show and tell, I said. They bite, she said. They escape. They escape into sewers and terrorize neighborhoods. They eat regular pets. I laughed at that, but your mother just said, they do. She flipped the fish in the skillet. The sound of frying started up again like distant applause. She blew hair from her eyes, stood with her hip cocked, holding the spatula. The applause quieted. She slipped the fish onto a plate she had covered with a paper napkin to soak up grease. She put 2 more pieces in the pan and watched them sizzle. She said, why would that man take that little girl? We don't know that he did, I said. But you think he did. Yes, I said, I do. I do too, your mother said. You know, she's Danny's age. They could still find her, I said. But you don't think they will. I don't know, honey, I said. I just don't know. Well, she said, I don't think they will. She lowered the flame on the stove and turned to stare out the window. She was touching her fingertips to her thumb, one after the other, something she did when she was concentrating. The air in the room was shifting. She said, what would we do if something, it won't, I said. Not to him. She nodded, pressed the heel of her palm to her eyes. She said, we're still getting a dog. I know, I said. And you owe me a new ice chest, she said. I poured milk for you, but returned our glasses to the cabinet and opened up 2 bottles of beer. The meal was starting to feel like a celebration, like one of us had gotten a raise or was having a birthday. I found some cocoa mix and stirred it into your glass. An alligator, your mother said, shaking her head. Caiman, I said. You know that some husbands bring home candy, right? Or roses, or God forbid, diamonds. They're poor wives, I said. They probably, hey, she said. Hey, tell Danny you caught it. Tell him you were fishing and you saw it and you caught it just for him. You want me to lie to our son? I said. I want you to make up a story for him. Something with a happy outcome, she said, and turned off the stove. She went to the refrigerator and took out the tartar sauce and a salad she had been chilling. The wind lifted the curtains over the sink and sent a few paper napkins gliding off the counter. Your mother closed the window, and the kitchen went as quiet as a secret. And then, with the wind shut out, we could hear your boots on the floor in the hallway. You were stalking toward us, planning one of your sneak attacks. Your mother sipped her beer. There was flour still on her neck. It looked like snow, like a smeared galaxy, and she was smiling a little. I understood what she didn't. You had been awake the whole time, listening to us. You already knew about the Caiman, about the flimsy, hopeful story I'd tell, about everything else. The only surprise left was that I did believe they could still find that little girl. I thought her uncle might prove everyone wrong. Maybe he cooked her favorite meals, played her favorite movies. Maybe he never touched her. Maybe such extravagant, misguided love was still possible. As a baby, you liked putting your feet in my mouth. You'd laugh until you got the hiccups, and your toes would move behind my teeth as slow as growing coral, and I ached to spare you all of what was to come. I wanted to bite down, to crush your perfect bones, to swallow your body whole. Your mother knelt to pick up the strewn napkins. You were just on the other side of the door now, trying not to giggle and preparing your ambush. Maybe you knew we were on to you, maybe not. I joined your mother on the floor. I felt like we were praying or giving thanks or mourning. The kitchen tile was cool, hard. We were listening to you breathe, waiting for you to strike. We were on our hands and knees, our bodies low to the ground like strange, ancient creatures. That's that one. Thank y'all. Okay, so that unfortunately went a lot quicker than I thought. I'll read another very, very short story. This is a really new story. One of the things that I love is cover songs. I like hearing when a musician or a band takes a song that already exists and plays it in a different way. It makes me hear the original song in a way that I hadn't before, and it always makes me want to go back and listen to that original song. There's a really famous story that some of you may have read over the years, or you certainly will read it. It's a story called Girl by Jamaica Kincaid, and it's a very short story, and it's basically a stream of consciousness narrative with a mother giving advice to her daughter, and some of the advice is beautiful and perfect, and some of it is very, very questionable. And I've read this story countless times, and I've always wondered what a father would say to a son, what kind of stream of consciousness narrative would go through a father's head giving advice to his son. So I've done a cover song version of Jamaica Kincaid's Girl. It is, not surprisingly, called Boy. I think that's all you need to know. So, Boy. Twist your fist when you connect and you'll tear the other man's skin. Aim for the bridge of his nose, his throat. If there's something heavy to swing, a pipe or a board, pick it up before he does and you can lay him out. Drive a truck with a manual transmission. Carry a knife. Sharpen the blade on wet stone. When buying cedar for a fence, look for knots and warps in the wood. When your son grabs an asp on a tallow limb, take the chewing tobacco from your mouth and press it to the sting. Open doors for women and pay them compliments as they pass. Make eye contact like a man and not like the coward you're so bent on becoming. This is how you drive a nail. This is how you hitch a trailer and change a tire. This is how you run a horse. This is how you clean its hooves. Always watch the other man's chest, not his deceitful head. The chest can't feign. Is it true you cried when that tow-headed boy whipped you? Mow the yard in the morning and water at night. When a dog is dying, don't hassle with the vet. Feed him fried hamburger until he stops eating and then carry him into the cotton field. This is how you load a pistol. This is how you fire a pistol. This is how you clean the barrel after a pistol's been fired. But he didn't whip me and I didn't cry. Eat steak with yellow mustard. The same with biscuits. This is how you walk with a woman. This is how you make jambalaya. This is how you check Freon in an air conditioner. This is how you hang a door and blow in an acoustic ceiling and cheat at cards and pawn your tools. Join the Army, then the Coast Guard, then the Navy, and try to avoid becoming the coward you're so hell-bent on becoming. Then take the civil service job on the base and look for overtime. Carry cash, the bills facing forward. Tuck in your shirts. Never pay that much for a shirt again, boy. The night before garbage day, drive your truck through the Ocean Drive neighborhoods, scouting what others have thrown out that you can still use. Never throw out anything anyone else can use. Know the difference between good and good enough. Never settle. When you do settle, never complain. This is how you fold a flag. This is how you tie a bowline. This is how you pick a lock. Keep a card in your wallet listing her dress size and her birthday and your anniversary. Carve with the blade away from your body. Turn off the lights when you leave a room. This is how you stop a leak with a piece of bread. This is how you quiet a floor with talcum powder. Before buying the truck you want, tell the owner you're after a car and he'll drop the price. Wear your hair short. You're not a girl, you know. Wear black steel-toed boots. Always keep your voice low, especially when you're angry. Make the other man lean forward to hear and then crack his deceitful head with yours. The bridge of his nose. In this way, he won't recognize you as the coward I've warned you against becoming. This is how you catch snakes. This is how you track deer. Work in the sun and sweat and rinse with the garden hose and coil it back up. If you have a woman on the side, keep her there. This is how you keep her there. Use the truck to haul the lumber for the new fence. Use the truck to haul the old fence to the dump. Never ask anyone to carry your load. This is how you roof a house. This is how you sweep up after a day's work. This is how you stay up all night when the horse colics. This is how you hold everything in until it turns to bone. Always mow the yard one last time at the end of the summer. Run the engine dry. Empty the tank. But what if the lawn isn't high enough? You mean to say that after all, you're really going to be the kind of man who can't grow a lawn? Thank y'all. Once again, faster than I anticipated. We are really running out of things to read. So this will be the last thing that I'll read. This seems appropriate to me given that we're being hosted by the American Book Review, which, it gives all these wonderful book reviews, all of these essays on writing, on teaching, on anything that has to do with literature. They haven't yet, to my knowledge, talked about anything that has to do with publishing or how to get published. So I thought I would try to address that need here. This is called On Rejection, or Dear Author, After Careful Consideration. Jeffrey, you're betraying yourself.
I'm nervous.
See how smart Jeffrey is? We hear that rejection preys upon and depends upon the writer's ego. Seemingly informed people tell us that successful writers appropriate rejection and they use it as a kind of fuel, that they co-opt the editor's or agent's malice, stupidity, or, worst of all, indifference, and they cure it until it becomes a kind of treat, something akin to beef jerky. And we hear that those who reject our work are not rejecting us. They're not rejecting our souls, because if we could get our souls on the page, we wouldn't get rejected at all. Instead, we'd get flown first class to Sweden to accept the Nobel Prize for Literature. They say this because most writers, especially beginning or unpublished writers, freak out over rejection. To the good men and women offering this consolation and advice, I say, okay, yes, sure, but you've obviously never ridden a skateboard. Think of it this way. After you start sliding on the middle of your board down a handrail that runs the length of 12 brick stairs and realize your back foot has slipped off and in less than a millisecond your quote-unquote eggs will be quote-unquote scrambled on the banister, then a form letter from a second-rate agent takes on a less pressing, almost appealing meaning. Like skateboarders, writers live by rejection. Like writers, any skater worth his or her salt must have the single-minded tenacity of a badger. learning how to spin and not over-rotate frontside caballerials over a spine in which you cannot see anything except sky or ceiling for most of the maneuver requires the same prolonged dedication as submitting to glossies and finer literary journals. Eventually, you will land with the board under your feet, and with an unparalleled surprise and elation, you will ride away. But in the first 100 or so tries, you're going to fall, and you're going to want to return to easier tricks. Things like frontside carves, or paying mortgages, or having babies, or performing brain surgery in the dark on yourself. This is a long, meandering way of saying that writing, let alone getting published, is as frightening as it is difficult. And in many ways, these two endeavors demand perfectly divergent skills. The tough-skinned, hard-won confidence that it takes to survive rejection after rejection is the polar opposite of the necessarily vulnerable and acutely sensitive work of writing an affecting piece of prose. In other contexts, however, maybe the demands aren't quite so dissimilar, for writers reject their own work every day, deeming this paragraph or sentence not worthy, too lax or long or confusing for inclusion in the finished manuscript. So then it comes down to trust. Writers who second-guess themselves because they've received yet another rejection from the editor who's been so encouraging in the past will often fall victim to not trusting their work or its process. That is, they will deny themselves that essential, empowering privilege, the privilege of bad writing, the privilege of, in Annie Lamott's famous words, the privilege of writing shitty first drafts. So perhaps it would help to think of publishing as a process as well, a process as idiosyncratic, wanton, and bewildering as writing a publishable story. If one cannot trust editors or agents, and editors and agents should only be trusted after they've agreed to represent or publish you, then one can certainly trust the process of publishing. You can take a Zen-like solace in sending out manuscripts and place faith in the admittedly unfounded idea that all good work will find an audience. Writing, I believe, is an act of faith, an act of courage. Publication, that last absolutely necessary separation of the writer from his or her work, is the means that justifies the end. Beyond our dreams of film options, glowing reviews, our names in prestigious tables of contents, publication becomes a key that opens the door to what we really and truly want: readers. Henry James says that all writers are readers moved to emulation, and I would humbly add that we read and write out of a tremendous curiosity about other human beings. It's a cry from the heart, a protest against our own mortality, and we believe there are more of us out there. Stated another way, if you keep sending out stories and poems, you will eventually get good news when you open your self-addressed stamped envelope. It's stilting, laborious, and compromising work, but the readers are worth it. We know that, and we know we're not alone. As a way of attesting to our community of rejection, I'll close by sampling from rejection slips I've received over the years. And you should know that with the exception of this first rejection that I'm going to read to y'all, all of these were for stories that were in Corpus Christi, the book that is out there. So you just have to persevere. So all except this first one were for Corpus Christi stories. The first one: Dear Mr. Johnston, having a talking cow in a story is nothing short of disaster. Next one. This lovely story suffers from bland language and perhaps not enough plot. Next one for the same story. I'm distracted by the narrator's voice, and I feel the overly prominent plot overshadows all else. Next one. Honestly, Mr. Johnston, this may be one of the finest stories I've read in 20 years, but because of backlog pressures, I'll have to pass. Next one. I got a real kick out of seeing my grandmother's first name in this story. She was a real twit, that one. She liked to soak peanuts in her Pepsi. Next one. On a standard form rejection letter, the word over was scrawled at the bottom. When I flipped the paper, there was nothing there. Next one. September 20th, 2000. Mr. Johnston, I'd be delighted to publish your story and make your wonderful writing known to the larger world. Next one. May 14th, 2002, from the same magazine. Sorry for the long delay, but I wanted to let you know the magazine is in a permanent state of suspension. You're free to send the story we accepted elsewhere. Next one. Stories devoted to the geriatric theme, the editor wrote the word twice, run across my grain, and over the years I have seldom published a piece of fiction written in that vein. In any case, I don't think your story was a successful piece of work. My troubles with the backlog continue here. I'm doing my best not to add anything to it, especially fiction or poetry or nonfiction. But if you'd like to submit another story by April 15th, I suppose I'd get around to it.
Taking notes.
Finally, this last selection marks the only occasion on which I've corresponded with an editor who has not accepted the story in question. Mr. Johnston, I feel you may lay it on a bit thick at the end with that dying donkey. My response, what dying donkey? Thank you all very much. I believe I am now supposed to answer y'all's questions. Yes, ma'am.
What are your thoughts on self-publishing? If I self-publish, I can write my own comments.
If you self-publish, you can what?
Write my own comments.
You can write your own editorial comments?
Yes.
I think that's the biggest reason to self-publish that there is. Next question. Yes, sir. What school? It was Del Mar Community College in Corpus. Oh, did you know Ansel Dua? Yeah. He was a wonderful teacher. So let me just make sure I understand this correctly. You and I both had this amazing teacher, Mike Ansel Dua at Del Mar Community College in Texas, and you had a career in line that was going to make a lot of money for you. And he steered you away from that. What a great man. He should pay our rent. Yeah, he's a great man with very questionable financial savvy.
How are you spelling, or how does he spell his name?
Anzaldua. No. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So he's also a liar. That's what we get from this. Yeah. 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 Other questions? Yes, ma'am. To pursue writing? If there are classes available, I would take any and every creative writing class that you can. I would also pay attention to what you like to read. What kind of books do you like to read? And then try to write a book that you would want to read if you saw it on a shelf. You know, the standard creative writing advice is write what you know. And I'm okay with that because I think a lot of times through the course of writing, you find out what you know. You find out that you know a lot more than you thought you did. I'm more interested in the advice of write what you don't know. I'm more interested in the advice of write what you want to know. What I'm really interested in is write what you're afraid to know. Think of a situation in which you would never want to find yourself. Write about that situation. Think of the person who's closest to you in your life, a significant other, your parents, brother, sister, and if you knew that person was never going to read the story that you want to write, what story would you write? That's the story you should be writing. Other questions? Yes, sir. There will be a quiz later. No. I've always been really brilliant, actually. You know? No, I've never done a reading where I haven't been reading something, you know, stories that have been published, stories that have won awards, whatever. I've never done a reading where I haven't changed something as I'm reading it, where I'm heading toward a sentence and I think, oh, this is a real clunker coming up, and I'll change it, and you know, y'all will never know until I admit it. But yeah, I mean, I think I don't know that it has anything to do with being naive. I think it certainly does have to do with gaining experience. But I sort of look at it in a slightly different way, and that is that I think writing is maybe the only thing that I know of that gets more difficult the longer you do it. I think so much else in our lives becomes easier the longer you do it. You know, think about when you were first learning how to ride a bicycle, when you were first learning how to walk, anything. It gets easier the more you do it. When you're learning how to ski, whatever, surf, windsurf. It's hard at the beginning, and the longer you do it, it gets easier. Writing, when you first start off, it's really fun and it's invigorating, and it just seems like anything will work, and anything that you do is really, really good. And I think the longer you write, you realize just how difficult it is. And so I think that's what happens. You start to look at something you've written in a different light, from a different perspective. But again, I only hear about that from my friends who are not such good writers. Yeah. Other questions? Yes, sir.
How does being a writer from
I don't think it affects it at all. I think plenty of people don't like what I write, but I don't think that has anything to do with Texas, you know? And I think, you know, to be slightly serious, I'm still really fascinated by this area of the country. I'm absolutely fascinated by it. I think I think the coastal bend, South Texas, I think it's so unique compared to every other place in the country. And I think there's relatively been little written about it. And so it seems to me fairly wide open terrain. And it seems to me that it has so many different identities. It's such a complex character of a region. And so I want to mine that for as much as I can. You know, I really didn't start writing about Texas until I was living in Ohio. I really didn't. It took me being away from it to have that perspective for me to really become fascinated in the mystery of the people, of the region, of the landscape, of the weather, of everything. And it continues to sustain that mystery for me. And so my expectation is I'll keep writing about it until it no longer resonates. But I don't, you know, I'm writing another book of stories right now, and I'm writing a novel, both of which are set in South Texas, because it's still deeply, deeply fascinating to me. Yes, ma'am. What is there a different question? Maybe that seems really hard to me. Well, you know, there are so many writers that I wish would have a bigger influence on me. You know, a lot of people say, like, who are your influences? And I can name them. I can give you a whole catalog. But the reality is, I don't think they're having enough of an influence on me because I'm not as good as they are. You know, Cormac McCarthy, Alice Munro, Haruki Murakami. The list is just endless. I wish they had more of an influence on me. I wish they would shape me as a writer more than they have. For me, they're not doing their job yet, you know? So, other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I see you here skateboarding and here writing. Both are very focused, intense occupations. Can you give me an analogy? Skateboarding and writing?
Sure. I think, how much time do you have? I think the biggest similarities are that I think skateboarding and writing depend upon resilience. I think you, as a skateboarder, I think you have to try something over and over and over again. I think a lot of times you're going to be hurt trying it, and it's really just a battle of will. You know, will you give up or will you ride away? And that's how I feel about pretty much every sentence that I write. You know, I mean, I've said this before, and a lot of people think that I'm being modest, and that's a very flattering compliment when they think that, but I'm absolutely not being modest when I say that I'm not a good writer. I'm really not a good writer. My first drafts are horrible, but I'm a really, really dedicated rewriter. I don't think there are many writers out there who work harder than I do, and I think that comes from skateboarding. I mean, there are tricks that I've been trying for 10 or 15 years that I still can't do, and I still keep at it. I take sentences through hundreds of drafts, and that doesn't mean anything to me. That's what I signed on for. That seems to me the price of admission. I'm not sure other people do it that way. I think other people, when a sentence isn't working, I think they'll give up sooner than I will. My commitment is I won't give up. I also think skaters and writers look at the world in different ways than most everyone else. We had a wonderful dinner last night, and somebody at the dinner said, well, we have these pyramids on the UHV campus. What could you do on them as a skateboarder? And I said, what's the surface like leading up to it? And they said, grass. And I said, oh, I could do nothing on those. But I can't walk by a ledge and not notice if somebody has skated on that ledge. I can't walk by a handrail and not notice the pitch of the handrail or notice what the surface is like leading up to that handrail. I can't notice a fountain, I can't see a fountain and not notice whether it has skatable transitions. I think it's the same thing with writers. I think writers move through the world paying attention to things that other people don't. And I think usually you find the small detail, or usually you're seeking that small detail that's going to open up the world on the page. I think it's the same thing. I mean, I think it's an essence of vision in some ways. Sure. Yes, sir.
I've been living here a while, in this area of the country. I was wondering what you found fascinating about it. There you go.
I'll give you an example. Last night we were at dinner, and this good man right here, Charlie, who's going to have a wonderful book of stories coming out next year that y'all should all buy. We were at dinner, and we were talking, and I said, I've got a very dear friend that's going to come in tomorrow, and you know, can he go to lunch with us? And they said, absolutely. And I said, well, he's a vegetarian. Can we go somewhere where he can get something to eat? And he said, yeah, oh yeah, we can go to this place. He can get turkey. That's what I find fascinating about South Texas.
All right, well, on that note, let's thank Bret for coming out.
Great job.